try that one again. It's a very good start. I can project to the back of the room without a microphone, but that's not very good for the people on the live stream. Good morning again. I'd like to welcome everybody present in the chamber and to those listening or watching in online to the Business of the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee here at Lincolnshire County Council. I am Councillor Ian Carrington. I'm the chairman of this committee. Councillor Martin Griggs, the vice chairman, is also present. Could I remind you, please, that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's websites, and all your comments will remain accessible online, as the meeting remains on the County Council's website. In terms of a few housekeeping notes, we don't have a fire drill planned for this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors, that's the opposite end to me, and make your way to the front car park, assemble there and await further instructions. Could I ask everyone, including myself, to make sure that your mobiles, laptops, iPads and any other devices are turned to silent. And we do have a hearing loop which is now activated. Not seeing anybody in the chamber who needs it at the moment. Requests to speak will be collated by Councillor Martin Griggs, the Vice Chairman. We will try to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions, but I will close down the debate if necessary to ensure we keep to time. So I would appreciate contributions being succinct and concise, and I'd also ask you to indicate early when you wish to speak. So, housekeeping out of the way, we'll now move to the formal agenda, and item 1 is apologies for absence and replacement members. Jess, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Today we have It's not working. Thank you, Chairman. Today we have Councillor Bunny replacing Councillor Bowles.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is declaration of members' interests. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interests. Do members wish to declare any? I'm seeing none at the moment. Naturally, if anything occurs to you in the course of the meeting, make yourself known to the chair and we will take that declaration then. Moving to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of February 2024. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. You'll find them on pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack. They have been circulated in advance, so I'm not going to go through it page by page. What I would ask is, do we have a proposer for those minutes? If everybody's, the Vice Chairman proposes. Councillor Baxter, thank you for seconding. We will now vote. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. Those minutes are agreed as a correct record. I will initial them at the end of the meeting. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. I don't have any announcements to make today. The agenda before us is a little lighter than we're used to. However, I would remind officers who will be introducing items for consideration, the reports should be taken as having been read by members. You are nevertheless welcome to summarise key messages and what is required of the committee. Executive Councillor announcements. Councillor Colin Davey, the Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning, was unfortunately unable to attend this meeting. However, he has passed to me a statement to read out on his behalf, which I will do now. Councillor Davey writes, just a short statement for me as I've been away for part of the time since our last meeting. Councillors will appreciate how important food and farming are to the county's environment and its economy. In order to ensure that the Council listens to the current challenges and opportunities for the farming community, we have reinstated the Lincolnshire Forum for Agriculture and Horticulture. Its first meeting in its new format takes place in mid-May, and I look forward to hearing from the officer team about how we can continue to support the sector to best effect. As well as farmers themselves, there is a great deal of investment made by technical businesses in automation, product design, warehouse construction, and so on. We want to make sure that Lincolnshire's businesses get the best chance to be part of that investment, and therefore our Team Lincolnshire partnership is holding events on agri-tech and agri-food during May. Bringing businesses together and facilitated opportunities for them is very important to me. Elsewhere, we'll be flying the flag for Lincolnshire at the UK REIIF, thank you Colin, this is easier to write than to read, real estate event in Leeds. And I hope to use the event to promote business opportunities in the county to external investors. UK REIIF is becoming the most important investment event in the calendar, and I expect that the team and I will be very busy whilst it is on. Finally, as well as taking a big picture approach to economic development through exhibiting at events like UK REIIF, it is important that we also deliver small schemes across the county. We have finished the civil engineering works that are the main part of our Sutton Bridge scheme to make easier connections between the marina and the town centre, and the public realm activities will be completed in time for a celebration event in early June. Preparatory work is continuing on schedule for the project to extend Horncastle Industrial Estate in partnership with East Lindsey District Council, and the team is working to bring the devolution capital funding projects forward for early delivery. And that concludes Councillor Davies' statement to members. We don't have his deputy, Councillor Dyer, with us this morning. Are there any questions? I'll probably seek officers to ask these, Councillor Baxter, but please go ahead.
Thank you. It's disappointing that neither the executive member nor the deputy are here, but I wanted to ask about the Food and Farming Forum, if that's what it's called. How are the participants selected? Are they nominated, elected? Is it an open invitation? How often are the meetings? How does it go ahead? Who's in charge?
I think we have an answer forthcoming to that. Who's going to take that one? Vanessa.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman. So the first meeting we have worked with partners to invite people to, but it is an open meeting should you have people that you would like to talk to me about receiving an invitation, if that's something you'd be interested in, Councillor. It is aimed at the sector, so we're looking at active farmers being involved. I think one of the pieces of feedback that we received from the scrutiny panel work that we did was that it was really important that we work directly with business owners, with landowners, and we've particularly sought out younger people within that. That was another theme that came through from the scrutiny panel, and we are lucky to have some business owners who are doing some really innovative pieces of work across Greater Lincolnshire. Everything from adding value to the products that they produce to kind of regenerative environmental work that they're doing. So we've been really keen to work with the likes of the NFU to seek out some of those people initially. But as I say, it isn't a kind of closed meeting. It is there for people to join if you have interested parties.
Ashley, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you for the invitation. I'll pass the details on to people I think will be interested. However, is it a constituted body? Is it an open event? And who does it feed to? So presumably, they all get together in a room and talk about things the county could be doing, or the government could be doing, or they themselves could be doing, and come up with some great ideas. Where do the ideas go?
So we'll be reporting back to this committee, but there is also the civil service team who oversee a kind of national network of rural fora. So we'll be feeding into that as well and helping to join up the dialogue between civil servants and people who are doing the work on the ground too. So in terms of our reporting, certainly back through Scrutiny Committee, and of course we're scheduled to come back to this committee to talk about the progress that we've made since the work that was done of the Scrutiny panel in autumn, I believe.
Excellent. I was particularly pleased to see that item in Colin's report, and also the item on the extension of the Horncastle Industrial Park, which I was able to visit with county officers when it was, as it were, a gleam in the eye. And I do think that both of those just emphasise how much work this council, and indeed our district councils also, do in facilitating the private sector. There is a great deal that we can do to bring people together, which actually magnifies like a lens the effects on the private sector and the general prosperity of our county. So that's good to see. Do I have any more questions on Councillor Davies' report? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I was actually to expand on Councillor Baxter's points, actually, because forgive me for this, but I've never heard of this group or organisation or whatever we've decided to band it as. I suppose for me, really it'd be quite good to circulate, I think, information of this to all councillors, because, I think in the south of the county, I know a lot of the landowners, and there's a young farms network and everything else. My only fear is, I suppose, is what are the tangible outcomes we're actually looking to achieve through this? Because in reality, it almost sounds like we're replicating what the NFU already do in terms of listening to concerns of landowners and businesses and farmers. They've already got connections into government, probably stronger than what we have as a county council in terms of the NFU, in terms of feeding into DEFRA. So are we not replicating what is already out there already, if that makes sense, instead of us collaborating with the likes of the NFU in terms of addressing the needs of the farming community?
Thank you. So we're really conscious of the level of work that the NFU do and the era of government that they have. So we've worked with the NFU, with the CLA, with others organisations to make sure that we're not doing that. As I say, DEFRA themselves have a national network of these forums, so they're really keen to see this happening in Lincolnshire. And I think it's about us managing the agenda so it's complementary rather than duplicative of the campaigns that they're running. But that's certainly something that we can reflect on when we come back to you in the autumn and kind of share views on how things are going and its purpose going forward. In terms of sharing the details of the meeting, absolutely happy to share that with members and to promote it. I know working with comms colleagues to make sure that we promote the work heavily, and there'll be a presence at the Lincolnshire show in terms of this theme of activity of work as well.
Yes, I think it would be, just picking up on Councillor Cook's point, I think it would be very helpful if all members could receive details of that, and also if members of this committee could have details of what the marketing programme is for it and how that's going to be handled. I think that would be very useful background information, and obviously we look forward to a report. You mentioned the show. The show is obviously going to be after this forum is held in May. So is the idea to kind of have a mini session of the forum at the show? Is that how it would work?
That isn't a plan to have a mini session. I think there's a theme that colleagues are working on for the show, and we will be part of that work on the day.
Okay, thank you. Any further points about Councillor Davies' written statement? I'm not seeing any from the floor. Therefore, we will move on to senior officers. Are there any announcements from senior officers? I'm seeing a shaking of crucial heads. So we will take that as a no, and we will move on to agenda item number 5, World Heritage Site Proposal, the East Atlantic Flyway. Now, the report for this item can be found on pages 15 to 20 of the agenda pack, and the report outlines the work being undertaken by external agencies, underscored by the Council's endorsement. It highlights the procedures governing the identification of World Heritage Sites and underlines the potential benefits associated with such esteemed recognition. As such, these benefits extend beyond safeguarding and improving habitats, encompassing economic prospects and synergies with ongoing environmental initiatives, particularly those along the eastern coastline. So in terms of the actions, it is asked that we, 1, recommend to the Executive Councillor for Environment, Economy and Planning that the County Council supports the proposal to add the East Coast Flyway to the UK tentative list of World Heritage Sites, and 2, recommend that assistance to the project leads, government and other agencies is given by officers of the County Council as and when appropriate. And the report will be presented by Chris Miller, Head of Environment, and we will take questions after that report. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, councillors. As ever, the bulk of the detail is in the report, but just as a brief overview, Every 10 years or so, the UK government invites applications for inclusion onto what's known as the tentative list of proposed UK sites for addition as a World Heritage Site to add to the existing 33 that we have across the United Kingdom, some of which are on these islands, some of them are in our overseas territory, looking at either natural or cultural values as the sort of baseline for inclusion. So as I say, every 10 years there is an invite to be added to the tentative list, and in this round we have an application from the RSPB National Trust and the Wildfire and Wetlands Trust, with the support from the local authorities involved on the East Coast, regarding the East Coast Flyway, which forms part of the East Atlantic Flyway, which I think you can see on page 16, I think it is. You can see the 8 flyways across the globe, which run generally north-south. So in the case of the one that's outlined in, if you have a colour copy, the red dotted area, which is from Siberia and Canada regions in the north, all the way down to the southern tip of South Africa. So this is about the migratory birds, utilising that flyway up and down the globe, and in the UK's area, it's looking at that east coast from North Kent to the north bank of the Humber, and really the sites is a linking of the 21 what's known as special protection areas, which are already designated. They are a EU designation for the protection of wild birds. So these are existing wetlands, and the World Heritage Site application is to treat those as a whole and to become an application onto the tentative list of what is now 7 sites across the UK, including I think a couple in overseas territories, for potential inclusion onto the World Heritage Sites going forward. Every 2 years the government can put forward one of the 7 to be assessed. So at the moment that work's been done, it's on the tentative list, and the work to put together all the evidencing as to the reasons why it meets the criterion of outstanding universal value, which looking at on page 17 in the column regarding natural values, it's item 10 to contain the most important and significant natural habitats for in situ conservation of biological diversity, including those containing threatened species of outstanding universal value from the point of view of science or conservation. So that's the hook on which this application is being made. As I say, it's already been accepted by UK government to be included on that tentative list. And then going forward, putting all the evidence base together for the actual final application to UNESCO whenever the government puts that forward in the 2-year periods that follow. In terms of the benefits to Lincolnshire, obviously having a prestigious designation on the East Coast is of value to us, and it will help underpin our obligations for biodiversity and habitat protection, as well as endorsing our work on ecotourism and aid in bidding for funding for infrastructure and for investment in people on the East Coast. What it won't do is provide any greater level of legal protection than is already in existence, because the SPAs themselves already have that. So World Heritage Site status won't add any extra in terms of the planning world or anything like that. And hopefully, Chairman, that's a good overview of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and a very interesting report it is, an unusual one. So, do we have any questions or comments from the floor, please? Councillor Higgs.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I see that really the 2 main sites are the Wash and the Humber Estuary. I just wonder if is there a corridor between the 2 that would be included in this area? And if there is a corridor, is there a width given to it? Are we talking of a few miles or nothing at all? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. it's those shaded yellow areas on page 18 are the areas that would be included in the site designation boundary. So it is just those existing special protection areas that would be given a broad status, but the corridors in between them won't actually align to that, but are obviously of importance in terms of those migratory birds travelling between them potentially. But in terms of the actual status for World Heritage Site, it will just be those shaded in yellow.
Councillor Fleetwood.
Yes, I think it's an excellent idea and an excellent concept to take forwards. And I don't quite know at what height the birds will actually fly at, and I don't think that anybody's particularly going to be monitoring them. But I am conscious of the fact that in certain areas, certainly down towards the Wash, there is, here we go, there's a phone going. Certainly down towards the Wash, there's areas of MOD land which have been used for activity, practice flying. If you go slightly further up, we have the issues with regard to the Environment Agency and the flood defences, and I don't know if any of that will have any impact with regard to bird populations. And then if we go all the way along the tranche of it, there's talk of potentially electricity pylons and wind turbines along the coastline, and whether that would have any effect on any of the bird populations. Obviously we have at a very high level, and I wouldn't have thought the birds will be at 30,000 feet with Schiphol going to America or whatever with aeroplanes, but I think somewhere at the lower altitudes we'll have the birds. Is there anything that needs to be addressed in those areas?
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. I think the first point to make out, obviously, this is more of a recognition of what happens already. These migratory species are already utilising that flyway. It's not going to suddenly encourage new species, so we expect the status quo to remain in terms of usage. You mentioned about infrastructure, energy infrastructure and so on the East Coast. As I say in the report, the World Heritage Site status doesn't add any extra greater legal protection. So whatever processes those are going through at the present or in the future will still have to adhere to the recognition of them already being special protection areas. So in that sense, it's not going to make any tangible difference in that planning side of things. One of the things that may be reflected upon is the coastal adaptation work. So, for example, and we've already seen it previously to the north of the county, the managed realignment work around Don and Nook, which created further wetlands as part of the scheme. So as part of the Environment Agency scheme to manage the coastline, they've included an element which increases the biodiversity and ecology benefits, habitat benefits for that area by creating extra wetlands and creating scrapes for little terns and the like. So it is all part and parcel of that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next is Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. So I suppose just reading the report, so in terms of what do we currently do in terms of supporting this, in terms of, because obviously I read in the report, obviously the status will enable greater access to funding, so then obviously we can improve the current sustainability and maintenance of the biodiversity. So I suppose what are we estimating the cost to be moving forwards? And I think and I don't know if it's the World Heritage Site status or what it is, but when you say obviously there's no greater level of legal protection than what is currently afforded, I suppose why? Because actually in reality then, if it's not going to get any more further protection, why would we do it? I'm not against it, but why would we do it if it doesn't get any more protection?
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Yeah, that's very fair questions. I think predominantly the basis is around that prestigious status of being a World Heritage Site. And whilst it doesn't afford a legal protection, it does enable us to potentially crowbar in extra funding for the area, particularly, from my point of view, from a head of environment perspective and what the county council's work is in that biodiversity and ecology spheres that we work in. Particularly, we have the local nature recovery strategy currently being developed across Greater Lincolnshire at the moment as part of the national work from the Environment Act. Which will be coming back to this committee later on this year. and our biodiversity duty as an authority. So it will help and aid us in that, in our discussions with other players along the East Coast in those special protection areas, to make sure that we are getting those benefits. So also from a tourism point of view, we are looking at ecotourism along the East Coast to extend the season rather than it just being based around Skegness and Mablethorpe and the like, and that green tourism that we're already engaged with. We are working the Lincolnshire Coast Country Park, for example, the work we're doing on the England Coast Path. It combines with that to provide us with a different perspective on how we can encourage people to visit our coastline, invest some of their hard-earned pennies in the businesses thereof. So hopefully that's an answer as to why the County Council might be involved. The bulk of the heavy lifting will be being done by the three applicants, the RSPB and the National Trust and the Wetlands Associations. We will provide support along with the other, I think, 7 authorities in terms of any data or knowledge that we have to add into that process. We don't expect a great deal of shouldering of the work, as it were.
But in terms of financial input, what are you forecasting? If we are successful and we do get it, what is the estimated investment that the County Council will put into it?
As yet, we have no figures, because ultimately, at this stage, it was only adding it to the tentative list. That was relatively recently, so we haven't done any greater work with the RSPB and so on as to what the actual total potential outlay that we might have. It may be very, very little. It's just the fact that it's been designated. Well, I would hope for the former rather than the latter, obviously. But yeah, but we see it as an opportunity to really promote our coastline and you know, as I say, try and gain those benefits that we can get out of that status.
Thank you very much for that. And next is Councillor Mrs Austin. Good to have you back, Alison. What's your question?
First of all, I don't know if I should declare an interest. Obviously, like probably many other people in this room, I'm a member of the RSPB, but I do live within walking distance, if I've got the energy to walk that far, of Frampton Marsh, which has become the RSPB's flagship reserve, and from the number of visitors each year, and they come not only from all parts of the UK, but also Europe. They'll come over just for one bird from Europe because it's a very rare sighting. But we really, if we are to be having World Heritage status, then it's important that we have got the infrastructure to deal with this, and it's getting this balance, but we have to question these pylons. Is there any evidence that they're going to cause major issues? But also, when we've got visitors' numbers, this is tying in a little bit almost with the next item, isn't it? Have we got the accommodation? Have we got the roads? So there are thoughts for LCC, I think, aren't there, with regards to this, because it's potentially a very prestigious designation. So, you know, I'm potentially welcoming this, but ask, well, how can we help? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Austin. Absolutely, completely understand that. And yes, if we were successful in World Heritage Site status, or the project is successful in that, then obviously, you know, in my response to Councillor Cook, you know, we will be looking to draw down on the benefits of that, and I will be working with my colleagues sat ahead of me, one seat down, in terms of that tourism element. You know, it's work that we already do in terms of looking at our coastline and the things we already have ongoing in the Coast Country Park. You know, the fact that the National Trust is now, you know, looking to develop a portion of that, the work we do on the England Coast Path, and that tourism product that we have, and making sure that the infrastructure fits the bill for what we want to try and encourage. So again, I see it as an extension of what we already do rather than something that's wholly separate.
Thank you very much. And next is Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the report. I definitely welcome this. I think it's a great idea. It's really good to have some good news at the committee, and something we can all be hopefully positive about. especially when it involves welcoming migrants to Lincolnshire and the UK. I think that's to be applauded. The badge, the reason for it, I guess, is mostly the badge of being able to say Lincolnshire is a host to a UNESCO site and aren't we special? Yes, we are, and it's nice to be acknowledged that we're special. I'm not sure if I don't know if you remember the conversation at the last meeting, whether it's ecotourism or green tourism, doesn't really matter, I suppose. But this is like an Olympic bid, is it, that we are kind of, we're on a short list of the bottom of page 18, which looks fascinating. I hope we can fend off the Grace Hill Moravian church settlements that I'll have to Google when I get home for this flight path. But if we get through I guess the boot camp or the shortlist, we then go into a process and eventually, what would be the timescale? What would be the timescale for announcing the success or otherwise? This scheme appears to start at the Kent coast, but obviously the flight path goes well beyond that. Has there been any consideration of where the birds go next and whether it would be part of the same heritage thing? I don't know if that would be even possible or a good thing. But mostly, Chair, I want to say that I'm happy to support this and to keep going. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Yeah, it isn't actually in the report, but if you actually look at the East Atlantic Flyway, there are at least two, if not, I think there might be three existing World Heritage sites based on the Flyway, or partly on the Flyway. One on the west coast of Africa, which I can't pronounce the name of and can't remember off the top of my head. And then you have the Waddensee, which is the other side of the North Sea from ourselves, which also benefits from World Heritage Site status. And we will be probably looking to reflect how the Waddensee area is managed. And I know that our colleagues in North Norfolk, who have dealt with the Waddensee project, have managed to lever in significant amounts of funding for various projects over the last few years. Unfortunately, the Lincolnshire coastline was outside of the area that could be included. So yes, it is a recognition of that whole flyway. It's not just the east coast of the UK. There are points along the way which are already recognised, and we'll be adding into that. So yes, hopefully that answers the question. Oh, sorry, yes, of course, timescale. It depends a little bit on the government as to which ones they put forward in the 2-year period, each 2 years within the 10 that the tentative list is reviewed. So the tentative list last time, there's 2 existing, and I can't remember which 2. 2 of those 7 on page 18 were ones already on the tentative list that hadn't been put forward already, and then there are 5, including the East Coast Flyway, that have been added to that. So it depends a little bit on that. And then after that, I think it's about a 6-year period. So it is quite a lengthy period in terms of progressing this through to status. But with the project, I keep saying we, it's predominantly someone else's project that we're supporting, but the project has taken that first step, and it has passed the first hurdle into getting onto the tentative list in the first place. Anecdotally, my understanding is that the signs are encouraging for an early inclusion, and also from the UNESCO point of view that it would be an acceptable bid.
Thank you very much for that. A couple of points that I was going to chuck at you, one of which has been slightly anticipated by Councillor Austin, because if I take what she was asking, it was basically if this is successful and if it does drive substantially the tourism numbers, not just the infrastructure, but basically would we be harming the wildlife sites themselves? Can the area overall cope? And I'd like an answer to that. I have to say that I thought immediately I read the report back to our previous couple of meetings where we've talked about tourism strategy, where we've talked about segmentation. And this is one of those largely hidden segments that you don't necessarily see, but there are a huge number of, for example, bed and breakfast offers out toward the East Coast that are very, very heavily dependent and do very good business with people going to these wildlife sites specifically for that purpose. But by definition, it's a very quiet, often a very solitary occupation. Those visitors make a considerable contribution to the tourism economy of the county, but we don't see them because they're quietly sitting in a hide or in a sand dune on the wild coast or wherever it might be. So just confirmation of that resilience, really. And just secondly, going back to the process that you were talking about, Chris, what challenges and obstacles do you see in the nomination process as it goes forward? And do you have an idea in your mind of what our chances of success might be?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll deal with the second point first. In terms of those challenges, it will be in that evidence gathering in terms of making sure that it meets the criterion that I mentioned on page 17, I think it was, item 10 under the natural bracket, and making sure that the proposal outlines that it meets that outstanding universal value criteria that it's being looked at. That is the challenge, making sure that evidence base is sound. As I say, the signs already are encouraging that will be the case. In terms of, should it be granted the status and how we deal with that, you're absolutely right. Pardon the ham-fisted analogy, but we can't kill the goose that's laid the golden egg. By encouraging, by over doing the tourism angle almost, and actually making it more difficult and putting off migratory species from actually stopping. So again, will take some skillful handling. I would suggest that is already there. The work that the RSPB do at the likes of Frampton, as Councillor Austin said, that balance is already being sought, and along the East Coast, it's the work that Mary's been doing as well, and Hayley, that making sure that balance is right, that the infrastructure is there, that we are encouraging hotel and bed and breakfast catering opportunities, whilst always being mindful of what it is we're attracting people to.
Well, thank you very much for that. I'm not seeing any further, excuse me, I'm not seeing any further requests to speak from the floor. I think the general feeling, Chris, is that this committee is very much behind this, and we wish it well and really hope that it is successful with the UK government and that UNESCO then smiles on it. I think this would be a great fillip for the county if it goes forward. In terms of a formal proposal, members, I move that the committee endorse the report and recommend to the Executive Councillor for Environment, Economy and Planning that the County Council supports the proposal to add the East Coast Flyway to the UK tentative list of World Heritage Sites. And secondly, I move that the committee recommend that assistance be given to the project leads, government and other agencies by officers of the County Council as and when appropriate. Now, does anyone dissent from that? I'm seeing no dissent, and therefore that matter is agreed. Thank you very much. That was a very interesting debate. We move now to item 6 on the agenda, Strategic Plan Objectives for the Visitor Economy in Lincolnshire, which in a sense we've already been skirting around. The report before us can be found on pages 21 to 34 of the agenda pack. The report provides an overview of the strategic priorities of Lincolnshire County Council's Visit Lincolnshire team, which are informed by analytics from visitlincolnshire.com website, tourism research, and business support efforts within the visitor economy. The report highlights the significant progress made in promoting Greater Lincolnshire to visitors and emphasises the importance of continuously evolving and developing the website to meet the changing needs and preferences of consumers. And the actions that we are invited to take are as follows. Number 1, to note the current progress of the Visit Lincolnshire team and website. 2, to note the 2024-25 development plan and priorities as outlined in the report. And 3, to endorse the strategy for visitlincolnshire.com. The report will be presented by Mary Powell, Place and Investment Manager. Justin Brown, Assistant Director for Growth, is also present for this item. So Mary, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, councillors. I think our 3 key tasks for the team are business support, which we do on a one-to-one basis with businesses. We also hold workshops and we have training programmes. Product development, which obviously includes nature tourism and the whole bird watching thing that we've already talked about in the previous paper. And the interesting thing about the bird watching, particularly from a tourism point of view, is that it's out of season. So it's strongest in the spring, the autumn and the winter. And that's when we can offer our sort of Rolls-Royce product. So that's particularly good for businesses to take advantage of. And then thirdly, visit Lincolnshire.com. Now I see all three as entirely interrelated. We need businesses to embrace online bookability. Research tells us that that's what the customer wants. It's very important. We have some excellent businesses. It's hard to know the percentages, but we know 50% the last time we did the research are good or excellent, but it also means that we have some that are really a bit behind the curve. Oh, sorry.
If you'd like to finish your report, Mary,
Are you sure?
Yep. We'll come to Councillor Bunny. We'll just hear your report first, and then we'll come to questions.
I blame Justin for that. So we need businesses to embrace online bookability. We need businesses to develop experiences, to actually engage with that whole product development, whether that's sort of experiences, whether it's the bird watching, whether it's the opportunities of England Coast Path. And we need businesses to engage with Visit Lincolnshire.com. The more comprehensive it is, the better the offer is for the visitor. So the importance of Visit Lincolnshire.com is not just for the marketing, it's for the credibility that it gives us. When Hayley particularly is talking to the tourism businesses, the credibility that having a website that's delivering business and is working is incredibly important for us. So, and the fact that it's our vehicle to promote the new products that we're developing. So it does a big job. It also tells us about our visitors and what they're interested in, and research and visitor trends underpins all our approaches to all three key tasks. The research says that people want what Lincolnshire has, they're just oblivious that we've got it. It sounds a bit of a sort of mad statement, but it is important that we are constantly shouting about what Lincolnshire really is and what we've really got, and obviously that fits with all of those three key tasks. So we collaborate with all our district tourism officer colleagues and Destination Lincolnshire to publish visitor information. It doesn't matter at which point a business enters the system, we work together to kind of signpost them to the most suitable solution. We are working with Destination Lincolnshire that they will operate our social media for us. And we're also working to set up a website development group which will look at the analytics and strategic direction of visitlincolnshire.com, but I also hope that it will that the analytics of our district colleagues' websites will also feed into that, because the more research we have about our visitor and the experience that they're having with us, the better. So I see that website development group as really a sort of a growth area where we can really nail as much as we possibly can what the visitor wants, and are we offering it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we will take questions, and Councillor Bunny, I know that you have some time pressures this morning, so we shall definitely come to you first.
Thank you very much. I apologise for that.
No, sorry, Martin.
I welcome the report, and obviously tourism and visitor economy is important to the county. I, as you well, perhaps don't know, I represent the sort of market rates and the centre area of the county. And whilst we do benefit from what goes on, and I wouldn't want to knock it, I do think sometimes we can be rather lose out. Because when people think of Lincolnshire, you'll think of coming up to see Lincoln, up the coast, the Wolds and so on. And I'm just concerned sometimes for those smaller little businesses which exist just off those major points, and they sometimes can feel not ignored completely, but not quite as major players as perhaps the others are concerned. I think the other issue there is often that they are smaller businesses. They might be just 1-2 people. They don't always have the time to attend the conferences or the organisations or give time to the meetings that perhaps some of the bigger businesses are concerned. In my experience, for instance, you might have a very small little event group in our area, a small farm, whatever it might be, who struggles to work against Rand Farm Park or some of the bigger boys like that. And I think we're in danger of losing them if we don't remember and put some effort towards them, which is what I would urge you to do. The other thing I think is that we do have, particularly in West Lindsey, but I think around elsewhere, a lot of churches, for instance. We have the church festival come up, but I think we could possibly do more and use those over a longer period, whether it is putting together cycleways, walks around the churches or whatever. We're quite good at sponsoring the festival for 2 weeks in May, but there are still people coming in from the coast, come down the Sustrain cycle routes and so on, who are actually looking for those bits and pieces but find it difficult to get the information. So it's really just a plea to not to remember that central area, which is perhaps not as densely populated, might not get as many visitors as perhaps the outside areas do.
I think, Lincolnshire is, the tourism industry is characterised by not just small businesses, but micro businesses. It's both, but also I think we should turn that as a strength, in a very sort of individual service. That we have some excellent, particularly accommodation businesses that are offering a really good service. I agree with you about that it is difficult for some of them to come to training or programs, which is why the work that Hayley does on a one-to-one basis is often really helpful. We've just had quite recently the leaflet swap where we all get together, and the businesses, I think we had nearly 100 turn out, and it's a kind of a big chance for us to all get together. The atmosphere is always amazing, and it's that chance to share, which is really important. I absolutely agree with you about the church tourism, and I think what we've noticed on the nature tourism work that we're doing is actually the whole walking is the strongest part of the website. It's incredibly important, and I think we can develop that still further with themed walks. So whether that's themed around churches, themed around afternoon teas, pubs, or some history sort of theme. I think that's got enormous potential for us. I think we've got well over 200 walks on the website, but actually we can do more. And the work that we're doing with nature tourism, I think, is our opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Just quickly, one other thing which occurs to us sometimes in our area is that people often actually could be local families who've got their grandchildren come to stay, or nieces and nephews, grandnieces, need something to do for the day. And perhaps in the central area there isn't as much putting together a tour that you could do for one day without spending vast sums of money. And that's something else which I know that we've looked at in the West Lindsey area, and I think something we would like to promote more.
Yes, segmentation of our audiences, and to be able to put together itineraries through visitlincolnshire.com is our big growth area for 2024, and I think we can do again a lot in putting together those days out. I just thought of something I was going to say and I've just suddenly gone. No, sorry, it was there and it went.
Don't worry, it happens to us all, particularly me. Yeah, it really does underline, I think, the issue that Stephen raised. It really underlines the interconnectedness of this. I loved your phrase, Lincolnshire's got what people want, they just don't know that it's got it. And it is this business of almost a spider's web of different small offers that can come together and make a package for our visitors, which will actually genuinely surprise them. You know, if you go off and spend a fortnight, I don't know, taking ferries to different islands in Greece, the reason you're doing that, apart from the fact that it's sunny all the time, is because you are going to be surprised. You're going to find something different on each one of those. We can provide all of that within one county, usually with just as good weather, occasionally not quite so good weather. And that's the task that you have of moulding that into a comprehensible and accessible customer offer.
Sorry, I've just remembered what the thing was. One of the, it can be a strength and a weakness, but Lincolnshire has very strong repeat visiting to the county. Now, when people visit for the first time, quite likely they're going to do sort of honeypot, so they're going to visit the cathedral and the castle, and but with those repeat visits, that's the chance to actually sell them the more unusual, the quirky, the things that they might not have done, with it being such a big county as well. So I think, you know, using that repeat visiting as a big strength and offering them something different on each visit. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. We've got a growing list of speakers, which has just grown a little bit longer. Next on the list is Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillors Austin and Baxter. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Much appreciated. Thank you for this report. Great to see the progress being made here. That is very welcome. However, we're all aware there's more to do. So a few comments and a couple of questions. The comment is we do need to, I think you said, Chairman, interconnection, particularly working with our partners. You've referred to working with other councils and partners here. It's good to see we're doing that, because we do need to make sure we're getting the basics correct, such as those clean streets, safe streets, that experience there between other organisations. And you've referred there to return visitors. I believe that's so important. After the first experience, they must be made very welcome. For example, also events. We know visitors do return to events, and they do promote that amongst their friends, families and neighbours. And for example, we know, as a plug here in Spalding, the Flower Parade returns again for the second year this year. I'm also taking part in meeting the coaches that arrive, about 70 coaches across the country, and most of those are here for the weekend to other parts of the county and some neighbouring counties. Just a couple of questions. Are we promoting these events within our local schools? Because Councillor Bunny mentioned the family offer. We know school children can be great at selling this, particularly to families and to grandparents. We do need to make Lincolnshire fashionable, and we do need to be open for business and make people welcome, because we know customer service is so important. Try not to be disloyal, but this weekend I was in a different county, had a great experience. We did report that back to friends, family last night about promoting the place, so we will return again. So how are we promoting this amongst schools? And also regarding the workshops and training, what exactly does that include? So some more information on that. And does that include customer service skills and how to improve? So, and also the gaps, what's missing and what do we need to do next to go even further, if that makes sense. I'll appreciate a few comments. Thank you, Chairman.
The training that we run, which could be a workshops. So we've just run a series of workshops about the coming of England, the coast path. So getting businesses to think, right, when it opens in 2025, these are the opportunities for my business, and how can we help them? And also some kind of interconnecting with those businesses, that there are opportunities actually if they work with each other on Coast Path. So they were really successful, and we'll be running more of those. We also have a training program that's running at the moment, which is called Your Business Boost, which has led out of a whole series of business boost work that we've done with the sector, and they work together with other businesses, and they find that, you know, that with working with their peers enormously helpful, and that as Councillor Bunny said, it can be quite a lonely business where you're very tied to your venue, and actually for them to work with each other and find actually that they've got similar problems and they can learn from each other is incredibly important. So that's a programme that we're running. I think customer service is something that we're always wanting to do more of. The research says that Lincolnshire that people find us very friendly, and you know, so that the welcome is good. Whether it's always quite as professional, perhaps sometimes, as we would like, is something that I think could be shaped up a bit, and I think it's a constant. It's not something that you can ever say, tick, we've done that. I think it's an absolute constant. And then Hayley does a lot of one-to-one work with businesses, where perhaps you can get to the nitty-gritty of the problems that a business has got.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We move now to Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. We've been talking a lot of the time about the small local type of tourism, but there are also big events, big anniversaries, for instance, coming up, and we know that there's a lot of interest in ancestry. Now, many of you are aware that in the year 2030, the American city of Boston, Massachusetts, will be celebrating Boston 400 years since the founding of that now city, Boston, Massachusetts, which was led, it may have chosen to take the name Boston, but there were people from Lincolnshire, and it was men and women, and in some cases children, from all over Lincolnshire. Spilsby's one place. Gainsborough, of course, is well known for being part of that migration. And how are we, is there anything that we can do to facilitate this? It'll be much more mass tourism for a relatively short time, although, if you like, it'll be over a year or maybe more, because people, once they're there, they want to look, you know, what are my roots? Where did people come from? So it isn't just Boston or Spilsby or Gainsborough, but it is little churches, as was being mentioned, here and there, where, oh yes, such and such a name, that person was baptized there. You know, so there's this potential for very, very large scale tourism for a quite short period in time, really. I know that a series of cultural events are being developed, led by an officer group, I think Lydia Rustling's the name, from Boston. But, and there's also been funding from the Arts Council and Levelling Up and so on. But, you know, what can we do to help the county prepare for this large influx of American visitors? That's my question. And please, is everyone aware of it? Thank you.
Well, I'm very much aware of it. Events and anniversaries are very important to the work that we do. And I think the huge advantage is that we've got, with it being 2030, we have got time to prepare. And I think that preparation and the work that you do is incredibly important. Many years ago, although when I was first at the county council, there was quite a lot of work done with Boston, Massachusetts, and I did go over to America and did some work at exhibitions there. The interesting thing is that this was then, whether it's still the case now, we're almost oblivious that there was another Boston, and thought that it was the other way around, that we were named after them. There was also the fact that the Irish community in Boston is very large. The Italian community in Boston is also very large. So it's very much about targeting. So not doing a kind of blanket sort of approach to Bostonians, but actually choosing the ones who have English connections and are very interested, and when you do that, you realise actually that group are extremely knowledgeable and are very interested. So I think blanket approach, not a good idea. Absolute targeting, and we've been discussing it in our tourism officers group, so with the Boston tourism officer. So we are on the case. We have got plenty of time, but I think it's a big job, and that pre-preparation is key, and targeting.
Microphone, Councillor Austin.
I've been out of meetings so long, I forget about this. Just picking up on your comment about where people come from and don't realise there's another Boston. I was sitting, when we went there 4 or 5 years ago, my husband and I, on, I think the transport is the T, I think they call it, and sort of tram type thing, but talking then to the people opposite us, oh, where do you come from? Boston. And they were amazed that there was another Boston over in England. So yes, these things go two ways, don't they? Right, thank you for that little personal digression.
They'd be even more amazed to discover that there's actually another New York also in Lincolnshire. Not quite as well equipped with high rises. Right, moving on. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I've been to New York. I had my photograph taken there, and it didn't cost as much as I thought. I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit critical of what's in front of us. The power of 3, city, coast and countryside, seems to me quite limiting. We've got so much more, and I think we can tell that everybody in the room is mad keen on Lincolnshire and promoting it and its tourism, and we've got such a lot to offer that it would be difficult to fix it all into one small report or plan. But I can't see very much in here, if at all, looking at the strategy and at the report, about the main bits we've got. I also, before I go on to that, the product development priorities for 2024, which are on page 22, and there's a list, doesn't seem to tally anywhere with what's in the website strategy. I don't know if it's supposed to, but if it does, I don't know how. But the bits that I think are missing from the strategy, website strategy, yeah, because this is, again, I'm confused, as I was last time, a bit confused. What we're being asked to do as a committee is to note the progress of the Visit Lincolnshire team and the website, and note the development plan and priorities in the report. But the development plan is only for the website. Is that right? That's my understanding of it. So within the website strategy, or within the strategy, Appendix A, there's not very much about ecclesiastical church tourism, not very much about ancestral tourism, not very much about military history. As everyone hopefully knows, there's an airborne forces trail being run in South Kesteven this year. Not very much about famous people. As you know, Grantham is famous for many people, including Isaac Newton and others. Not very much about set jetting, the film tourism thing, and not very much mention of any of the market towns, even the bigger market towns, let alone the smaller ones like Market Deeping. And then the bigger miss, I think, sorry to be critical, is the lack of measures of success. There's a reference to analytics, which says how many people have been on the site, but what's the measure of success? How do we know if this strategy is working? Is it number of hits? Have we got an aspirational number of hits? Do we want people to go to the website from different places? I think it says on page 30 how we will achieve this, but it doesn't. There's no mention of how we will tell whether or not we have achieved it, and there are no smart, specific, measurable, agreeable, realistic and time-based targets at all. That's why I'm an enthusiast for Lincolnshire tourism. I'm less enthusiastic about the report in front of us.
Mary?
City, coast and countryside was something that we developed late, I don't know, 2015, 16, when we did some research, and the research said that we were confusing the visitor because we were offering them too broad an offer, and that's when we reduced it to city, coast and countryside, and the results were, it just worked so much better, but the research said we were definitely before that we were definitely confusing the customer, and you know that trying to be much more targeted. I mean, city, coast and countryside is a bit of a obviously trying to catch all, but to do it in a brief and uncomplicated way. I've always felt that it didn't perhaps cover that market towns thing, which is very, very strong for us. But actually, if we talked about changing and adding bits to city, coast and countryside, but everybody, including the districts, all felt that actually we were going back to confusing the visitor again. And going back to my earlier point about people not knowing what Lincolnshire has, we have to be, from the get-go, we have to be fairly simple and straightforward, or we lose people. Some of the things that you mentioned in terms of market towns, doing more about that is in our priority for this year. We know that people are searching through towns, and that we are developing that area because it's good for our search engine optimization. And although they're all represented on the website, we know that we can do much better. In terms of the analytics and what's important, I think number of page views and those sorts of things are important. The one that's always seems to me the critical one is the click through to a booking. And at the moment we are about 19.3% rate of click-through to bookings, which is incredibly high, and some businesses are experiencing much higher click-through rates. So that's the one that I would be looking all the time at. That's the important one to me. You can play a numbers game in terms of people looking at your website, but did they actually do anything? Did they actually were they encouraged by what they saw to make a booking? So that is the one figure that I think is our measure of success, and the one that I'm most interested in. And aviation heritage and many of the things that they are, the film tourism thing is something we're working very hard on. So although we've put in those main product development areas, which are nature tourism, the market towns, the segmentation. That doesn't mean that we're not also working on film tourism and aviation heritage. They're all things that we are working on as well. But those are our main product areas for this year.
You don't want to come back. Can I just pick up on a couple of points that come out of that? Maybe I had misunderstood the role of the strategy, but I took the strategy as being a higher level thing, and I took the very areas that Ashley's raised, individual things like aviation tourism, for example, as working, not necessarily being spelled out in the upper level document, but those would be practical paths of implementation. And the other thing is that when I use the word segmentation, and I want to make sure that again, I'm not an outlier here, I do not just mean demographic segmentation of the target market. I mean segmentation by different tourism products, which may take us down to smaller specialist groups, be they cyclists, be they walkers, be they bird watchers we've been talking about, be they aviation heritage enthusiasts. I'm just slightly worried about the wording in the report that maybe I've got that wrong, so perhaps you could just address both of those points.
No, I mean, I absolutely agree with you that segmentation is, so lots of those areas of interest are covered through the segmentation and the packaging and the itineraries work that we're doing. So perhaps we haven't made that quite in the strategy quite as clear as we should have done, and I'm happy to adjust that if you think that's a good idea.
I think that would be very helpful. I think
will do.
If we could have an acknowledgement of those individual components, because they are very important. They're important to individual members. They're important to component parts of the county. And I quite appreciate that a strategy is a strategy and an implementation plan is an implementation plan, and a strategy should be a clear document. But I think we could, without risking strategic focus, be a little bit more detailed, certainly in reports to this committee. It's good to hear from you and from Hayley that work is going on in all of these areas. I think next time this comes back to this committee, it would be very helpful if we could have a little bit about what that work actually is, just so that we can see what is going on. And again, going back to Councillor Baxter's points, it gives us a better bead on how to measure success. Because to me, I'm absolutely with you, it's click through to booking. It's outcomes that are the important thing. Yeah, you know, you can spend lots of time on the interweb looking at various options for discretionary spending. The important thing as far as we're concerned is those who come and spend here in Lincolnshire. So that to me is there are other metrics, but that is the absolute key metric. Do we have any other speakers? We have Councillor Baxter who would like to come back.
Thank you for letting me come back, and I think you added to what I've said in a far more elegant way than I do. It remains that the strategy in front of us, I don't know how, if we looked at it again in 2 years' time, I don't know how we would say it worked or it didn't work unless we've got a measure. If the measure is, and I don't disagree with it, there's probably other bits that you could add, but if the measure is we want to increase for 19.3, or we want to keep our relative strength of 19.3 against whatever Rutland or Yorkshire are doing, then that's a measure. Would we ever go as far as adding it to our measures? So when we get regular reports on employment and flooding and waste, I'd be interested once every 6 months or so to see whether or not we're getting better or worse. I don't want to put Mary under more pressure than she needs, but yeah, we need to keep looking at this to see whether or not it is going in the right direction. Yeah. Thank you.
Don't disagree with any of that, and I'm sure, Mary, you wouldn't disagree with it either. It's very important that we do look at outcomes.
We know there's an industry standard for click-throughs. I think is 4 to 5%. So 19.3 is, you know, we think is good. I suppose one of the other things, I'm not sure that we'd be able to get other counties to tell us what their click-through rates are, but worth a try. And I think probably our biggest thing is our businesses. they will tell us if it's not delivering. So perhaps we can, in terms of a sort of metric on that, perhaps we can do a bit more work on, we know from what they tell us, but perhaps we need to quantify that better. And
Again, just
Hayley,
going beyond the...
Could Hayley add something?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Hayley, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just to add to that as well, in terms of the metrics we look at, we look at a top line once a month and then once a quarter, and as well as conversion rates, we look at total number of users, total traffic, the growth of that, where those users are coming from. So there's a whole deck of analytics that we look at. And I think one of the most important things that we note in that is the astonishing growth. So I would say on average, year on year, those metrics are somewhere between 50, 60, 70% up year on year. So we know that the website is growing hugely and attracting more and more users, but that conversion rate is absolutely what we sort of hang a hat on as the benefit to the businesses, yeah.
Yes, that's very helpful, Hayley. I think just as I said, going beyond this specific report, I think you've probably got the feeling that what the committee would like to continue to see is a little bit more detail about the activities you're doing. And I appreciate that we also say, oh, keep those reports brief and concise. Yeah, there's no pleasing us. And also that business of outcomes. The way we measure success is always very important to consider, and what those outcomes actually are in terms of a measured way. But we have the Vice Chairman, Councillor Griggs.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just a quick one. I was looking at the average conversion rate for tourism industry generally, and 4.7 seems to be the UK average. 19% is phenomenal, in all honesty, which obviously shows that the right information is getting to the people who are visiting the website. I think what might help members of the committee is, obviously you guys have access to unfathomable amounts of data in terms of analytics, time, views of pages and all sorts. I think having some form of comparison to see the growth of the traffic in the website would probably help us to understand actually it is growing all the time. And again, things like a few more metrics that you have access to, I think would be really useful. But I think your conversion rate's fantastic, so keep up the good work. And I think if we sit here next time and go, your conversion rate's fell to 18%, that's terrible, that would be foolish on our part, because what do you guys feel has increased the conversion rate? Do you think it could be the fact that we've got a better offer lined up, or the fact that more people are staying more local for holidays and days out and such? So what do you two feel could be the key driver?
I mean, there's certain things that have been big drivers of traffic to the website. So we've relatively recently developed the events side, and that is a big driver of traffic. We did a lot of work on the walks thing with our countryside colleagues. That's a big driver of traffic. So always looking at new content for the website is very important to us. I don't think we can sort of say, again, tick, we've done it, because it's, people want to see new, they are repeat visitors, so they want to see new content, and so I think that's very important to us. I think it's quite difficult to get a sense of the visitor economy and since lockdown, how people are, what they want, and are they going abroad again? Are we offering visitors who stay at home? Are we offering them the right service? Not entirely easy to sort of work out what the answer to that one is. It's international visitors are not back at the level that they were in 2019, for example. So I think there's still a long way to go on certain areas. That whole credibility thing about the website is credibility at all sorts of levels. Credibility with the businesses, credibility with the visitor, what it can do for us in terms of our product development.
Thank you very much for that. Before closing the section, I just double check. Justin, you don't have anything you wish to add? You don't. In that case, well, thank you very much for the report, and thank you, members, for an interesting debate. I think you've got the tenor of members' views. It's to pinch, if I may, a phrase from the report. We really like what you do, but we'd kind of like to know about more of it, and I'm sure that we can have that in future meetings. We do have a proposal suggested before us, three parts. Firstly, I move that the committee is satisfied with the current progress of the Visit Lincolnshire team and website. 2, that we note the 2024-25 development plan and priorities as outlined in the report and endorse the strategy for visitlincolnshire.com. And 3, and this is, I think, an important part given the comments that have come up, I request that the comments from today's discussion be taken under consideration by relevant officers and the portfolio holder. Do we have any dissent from that? I'm seeing no dissent in the room. In that case, that matter is agreed, and thank you very much for everyone for their contributions on that item. We now move to the penultimate substantive item on the agenda, which is item 7, the Thedlethorpe Geological Disposal Facility Working Group 6-monthly update. This report can be found between pages 35 and 40 of the agenda pack, and the update provides the committee with the latest information on the proposals for a geological disposal facility at Thedlethorpe. 3 key developments have occurred since the last meeting, and those are: 1, the initiation of a community visioning programme for Mablethorpe, Withen and Thedlethorpe, aimed at informing potential government investment if the facility proceeds. 2, public opinion surveys conducted by Nuclear Waste Services regarding geological disposal in the area. And thirdly, ongoing collaboration with STEP Fusion as they begin siting efforts in West Burton, Nottinghamshire, alongside the broader sector developments offering economic opportunities for Lincolnshire. And the actions before us, the committee is invited to consider and comment on the contents of the report, which will be presented by Justin Brown, Assistant Director for Growth, Edward Wright, Senior Advisor for Energy Opportunities, Infrastructure, I knew that I would not get to the end of your title, Edward, without fouling up. I'll have another go. Edward Wright, Senior Advisor for Energy Opportunities, Infrastructure Investment, is also in attendance for this item. Justin, over to you.
Chairman, thank you. So your introduction has set out the 3 items that I'm going to cover. Quick reminder, bottom of page 35 and top of 36 about the Council's position on this, that we've accepted the invitation to join the working group, and that Councillor Hill is our representative on the community partnership, and that joining the group does not mean that we support the concept, and secondly, that the test of public support is the place where any decisions are taken. And apologies that I repeat that, but it's important that we set that particular position out. So in terms of the 3 items to update the Scrutiny Committee on since I last came, first of all, you'll remember last time we spoke about the community vision, and particularly that the community vision was going to be developed by a community partnership, and it would create the framework against which, if the development goes ahead, we ask for the government to create significant additional investment in the area. So that community partnership is now developing its vision. There's a small theme group which has been established. I've got a couple of the team who sit and support that theme group, and the headlines from the vision are as set out at the page of top of page 37 there. So place, economy, environment and education. Now I think one of the things I need to reassure the Scrutiny Committee about is that we've established a programme team within LCC to take that vision and ensure that we do some analysis of the infrastructure requirements in the area and ensure that the vision itself can support those infrastructure requirements, and most importantly, vice versa. And therefore, that will give us a basis for going to government and saying, these are the sort of strategic infrastructure investments that we would be seeking should the GDF go ahead. That'll be in terms of flood prevention, it'll be in terms of roads, potentially in terms of rail. Second item in the report is about a public survey which was carried out by Nuclear Waste Services. So to be clear, by NWS, the developer, not by the community partnership. And they spoke to around about 250 people, and there is some helpful information on the second half of page 37 about some of the findings. Clearly, people want most information on safety, on the impact of house prices, and more general information about impact. Now, Ed, on my right here, will now be carrying out some work for LCC to ensure that we are aware in very, very detailed levels of information about those matters, so that we can ensure that the community partnership is asking the right questions, so that we can ensure that the right information is made available to the public. Why is that important? Well, the very final line on page 37 is really important, that in the piece of work, this consultation carried out by Nuclear Waste Services, they asked people who their preferred provider of information would be, and local authorities was number one on that list. So we think it's important that we do some work around that. And then finally, in the report, there is reference to wider nuclear industry development and relationship with Lincolnshire. So as we've discussed before, the fusion plant at West Burton is now developing, and as we've discussed before, there is some very good engagement between the developer, the local authorities in the area, and wider authorities. And that has led to a piece of strategic work amongst education and learning providers to ensure that they're going to provide the right skills for the area and provide the skills that will help people gain employment, and that includes people obviously on this side of the Trent. There is a piece of work being carried out on a transport analysis, which again recognises that travel patterns will be on the east of the Trent as well as the west of the Trent, and we are fully engaged in that. And there is work on business supply chain as well. Final thing to mention is that the nuclear industry sector is something which is growing within the country, and that provides employment and business opportunities. And therefore, from when we spoke last time, where we spoke very much around saying that there are opportunities, we've now moved from there are opportunities into analysis of the opportunities and working with people like the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre to ensure that Lincolnshire businesses gain opportunity from things. So the same issues remain, Chairman. It's very much a question of the vision, of ensuring that we support the community partnership in developing information and in looking at the wider impact of nuclear sector on the area. But hopefully what I've just described to you demonstrates that things are moving in each of those categories and that we're taking various actions. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Justin, for that report. Members, do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Spratt.
Thank you, Chairman. I did say at one meeting that I thought it was an excellent and thorough report, and I got into trouble for saying it, so I shan't say that today. I'd just like to say I do like the vision that's presented in the report. One thing that does worry me, as soon as you mention that word nuclear, could it potentially kill this project off? And I think as well as describing the positive aspects in the vision, which is very important, of course, we need to make clear
the type of nuclear, or the definition of what variant of nuclear we've got here. We're not talking about weapons grade nuclear procurement, are we? Because I think a lot of people, when you mention nuclear, think that. And so I think that communication strategy on this vision is hyper important. And we need to make that clear, if I may suggest, the variant as I've indicated. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spratt, and certainly two reflections on that. The first one is that partway through the report we recognise that there are 20 or so geological disposal facilities being developed across the world, and we really do want to ensure that lessons learnt in developing those, both pro and con, are properly understood and communicated, and that feels like something which is very important for us as a local authority to do. I think it's also really interesting when we think about all of the different business opportunities, for example. So we know that there are a number of businesses who have licenses to develop small modular nuclear reactors in the country. They are currently looking for manufacturing plants. They are looking for engineering businesses to build the tanks in which they store things. They're looking for engineering businesses to build the conveyor belts they use, etc., etc. And part of the work that we are hoping to do, not hoping to do, part of the work that we will do is about an analysis of those and the opportunities that that brings to the manufacturing sector and also to the technical knowledge sector in the county. So when we talk about that one word, it opens up so many other things, and completely agree that it's important that we get the narrative right. Thank you.
I wonder if I could just do a supplementary on that. And this is not about STEP. This question is really about Theddelthorpe. If I've read the report and the background information correctly, we've got, as you said, about 20 of these going on around the world, various ones going on here in Europe, and indeed there's one which has been quite widely publicised as a much more at a fairly advanced stage of construction in Finland. One of the things which seems to come out is that when research has been done in other countries which are doing this kind of work, there is a greater level of understanding of what is actually involved than there is here. Now, I appreciate that Nuclear Waste Services are doing some research, but I wonder whether people, my concern really is, are people fully equipped in terms of information yet to make the decision they will be asked to make in 2-3 years' time? Because I'm just concerned that if our residents don't have the level of briefing, if you will, that their equivalents in European countries, they are not on a level playing field, and they jolly well ought to be. One of the things we said in this chamber, and it was one of the first debates I attended after joining this council, when it came up, do we join the community partnership or not? My belief was that we should, precisely to make sure that the hard questions are asked and that the information is provided to local people. I'm just wondering if there is still an information gap. Clearly we aren't NWS, but what can we do to make sure NWS objectively, not in a partial way, fill that gap?
Chairman, thank you. So the government's policy on the siting of geological disposal facilities gives that responsibility for providing information to two organisations. It gives it to NWS as the developer, and it gives it to the community partnership in each area. So in terms of NWS, we speak to NWS monthly on the basis of saying, as a developer, we are encouraging you to provide this information, and as a developer, this is what we would expect from you. We also, as I said, are active in the community partnership, so Councillor Hill represents the County Council. We have observer status on there as well. And the reason for recruiting Edward to my right is to give us the technical knowledge to be able to put real technical challenge and technical advice into that process of providing information. So it's sort of a three-prong attack. One is working with the developer to ensure they do what they say they should. One is supporting the community partnership, and having the leader of the council is an important statement in that. And then the third one is ensuring that we have our own technical knowledge so that we can really play a strong role in those debates.
Thank you for that. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chairman. I hear what Councillor Spratt says about this isn't atomic grade nuclear weapons or whatever. So this must be the friendly, safe kind of nuclear waste that you can play with in the playground or the classroom. There's nothing good about nuclear waste. Nobody wants it on their doorstep. It says within the report that one significant aspect of the vision, the community vision, is that it must be driven by local people. So question one is, who are these local people? And I guess they are working up to the test of public support. When will be the decision about the test of public support? I note the comments in public surveys, which you've said, the surveys have been commissioned by Nuclear Waste Services, which immediately makes me suspicious of the answers. If the answers you get from a survey sometimes depends on who's asking the questions. I think we, the County Council, would probably give a more objective survey than would Nuclear Waste Services. But within that, it says that when questioned on their understanding of what a GDF is, 20% provided, only 20% provided the correct answer, and this indicates the understanding should be increased for the community to make an informed decision. It seems to me that Nuclear Waste Services want to keep informing the public until they come round to thinking that this is a good idea. It doesn't say anywhere, as part of the Nuclear Waste Survey Nuclear Waste Services Commission survey, what the general feeling is among residents as to whether or not they want nuclear waste on their doorstep. Was any question like that asked? It talks about the biggest perceived benefits of a hypothetical GDF were, and the biggest perceived disadvantages. What kind of, numerically, how many responses were received as in terms of disadvantages and how many as benefits? How would we weigh up the community's perception of what are the disadvantages against what are the advantages? Because frankly, if this development means that we have more jobs on the Lincolnshire coast involved in providing more nuclear waste, more nuclear power plants on the east coast of Lincolnshire, then I don't want it. Lots of people clutch their pearls when we talk about the impact of solar panels on farmland and so on, and it's not surprising that some people don't want solar panels on their doorstep. But I'd like to know how many people actually want a nuclear waste facility on their doorstep. I would suspect it's not very many, regardless of whether or not Martin Hill or anybody else is on the board of the community group, whatever it's called, the community partnership. If my feelings aren't already clear, even though the County Council hasn't made its mind up about this development, personally, without being prejudiced or predisposed, I'm not seeing that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages.
So The community partnership, if you like, the people on the ground, is a partnership which is constituted to include local community representatives, local business representatives, local voluntary sector representatives, local government representatives, and was appointed through an open application process. And indeed, there were applications recently to the community partnership. Community partnership's aim is to ensure that there is suitable information in place to move towards a vote in 2027. Now, in terms of the survey we've identified to you today, that's one survey of many, and it has, as you say, been carried out by Nuclear Waste Services. The community partnership will also be carrying out temperature tests, and indeed the group which has been established to disagree with the proposal of a GDF is also carrying out surveys. What we're trying to do whenever we provide these papers to you is give you a point in time so that you can understand what items are of particular interest to people so that we can ensure that information is provided. All of this works towards that bigger vote in 2027.
Councillor Spratt, I think you wish to come back.
Yeah, it's just a comment, Chairman. I mean, only Councillor Baxter could make a comment about children playing with nuclear material in the playground. Pathetic, frankly.
Let me just, before we get into any kind of response, I grew up a couple of miles from Sellafield, which you may also know as Calder Hall or Windscale. At Sellafield, when I was a kid, there were several enormous tanks, about twice the size of this room, each one, maybe 3 times the size of this room, each one, and rather deeper than floor to ceiling, which are full of water and also full of containers of high-level nuclear waste. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. This is not a low-level site. To the best of my knowledge, this is a high-level site. The containers in those tanks are now beginning to disintegrate, and a lot of the material mixed with the containers forms sludge on the bottom. This stuff is about as cuddly as a hyena which is hungry. It has to be dealt with enormous care and enormous responsibility. Those of us who have had the opportunity to look into, for example, what is being built in Finland and analyse that, and I'm sure that our team has looked at that example along with other examples, will know the enormous lengths which are have to be gone to, both in terms of stabilising the material itself, either through glassification or putting it in concrete, in relatively small quantities because it generates heat as well as radioactivity, and the way of storing it that is ultra long term. It really isn't anything remotely cuddly. It is a very challenging business. But in terms of it being on somebody's doorstep, well, it was on my doorstep throughout my childhood, and it is still on the doorstep of many people in a facility which will not stand the test of time. So whether it is at Thedlethorpe or whether it is somewhere else, something is going to have to be done to deal responsibly with this. You could argue that we should be blaming those who created the problem. But I have to say that in the 1950s, when Britain was a pioneer in nuclear energy, many of the problems and the long-term issues were not really fully understood. And they are understood now. We are the inheritors of that, whether we like it or not. I'm not saying it should be at Thedlethorpe. I'm not saying it should be any specific location. That is for the people to decide. But we need to look at this not in an emotional way, but in a very cold and objective way, because there is a major problem sitting at Sellafield. That problem is time limited. I know that there are people up there working very hard to keep the materials stable, but a long-term solution is something that we have to find because we owe it to our grandchildren and their grandchildren and generations as yet unthought of. And that is why I go back to my original point that I made in the whenever that first meeting that I had when I joined this council, that what we need to do is ask those tough questions so that the people who will make the decision in the local community are fully and properly informed. Councillor Wotton.
Thank you, Chairman. I've done a little bit of research into the background of this, and I understand that we're not the only area that this process is going on in. I believe Cumbria and Yorkshire and ourselves. And theoretically, we're all in the same boat. And a bit like Councillor Baxter, why would the local community really want to have a nuclear waste dump in the area that they live? For one thing, other than safety aspects, because everybody, you mention the word nuclear, and everybody becomes concerned, although theoretically it's one of the safest things that goes on because it's so heavily regulated. But who makes the decision at the end of the day when we've had all our community people going through all these processes? Say there's like 3 people in the frame, 3 different areas. Who actually makes the end decision? Because I can't really see the local people wanting to vote for this and to have it on their doorstep. And I believe it's Drigg in Cumbria, and that's coming to the end of its life within the next 5 years. And I believe that's low-level waste. And is that the thought that it would be low-level waste? And that's basically my questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Just in answering that, actually, I won't preface it. If you could just pick up those questions.
So, in terms of currently, there are 2 sites in Cumbria, one in Lincolnshire that Nuclear Waste Services are considering. Government policy, as I understand it, will create a point where the government and Nuclear Waste Services will go down to 2, and they'll subsequently focus extra analysis on those with a view to taking it down to 1 and then seeking a public vote, which we believe will be binary and binding. So that's the process as set out in the government's in the government's policy. I'll need to come back to Councillor Wotton on the other questions.
Yeah, as far as Drigg is concerned, I can confirm that is low-level waste because Drigg was the, when there was a railway station there still is a railway station there. It's where I got off the train from school when there was a railway station in Egremont. In just a moment. Yeah, the other sites, what happens if both of the final sites say no?
The policy is a curious one, and at this stage, I don't know, to be frank. That's a national problem, not a Lincolnshire problem.
It just seemed a kind of curious thing for government to do because the logical thing, if communities don't want it, is to say, well, we won't have it, somebody else have it. But whether there are 2, there are 3, or however many are left in the process, I think Yorkshire may have fallen out. I thought that one of the Cumberland sites may have fallen out, but I may be wrong. But anyway, if everybody says no, does the government then impose from the centre? What does it do? It's gone through this incredibly time-consuming process, which doesn't perhaps seem to be as perfectly designed as we thought. However, that's not a question perhaps that we can answer. Councillor Baxter, you had a point of information. Please go ahead.
Yes, Councillor Wotton mentioned the Yorkshire site. Mr Brown didn't mention the Yorkshire site. According to the press, a site at South Holderness was announced on the 25th of January. So if South Holderness is not in the running, then how did they manage to kick it out in such a short amount of time?
Let's see if they were in the running. Do you have any information on that one, please, Justin?
They chose to form a working group and then they very quickly disbanded it. I don't know why. I don't know why, and I don't know the process around that.
So just for clarification, could you just run through the remaining sites? We know there is Thedlethorpe. Where if the other two are in Cumbria, could you just identify, perhaps Edward, where they are?
Yeah, sorry, he's just whispered to me, but yeah, South Copeland, Mid Copeland, and Eastern Lincolnshire are the three. Eastern Lincolnshire. Okay.
Hilton?
Thank you, Jim. Just as a matter of interest, is anybody keeping a track of how much we're doing in terms of officer time and council investment? Because ultimately, the way I think this is going, from what we've said, I think it's a bit silly to say it's cuddly, because no nuclear, whether it's high level or low level. But I did say at a previous meeting, we're not very good at doing big capital projects in this country. And frankly, I think there's going to be such a lot of money spent on this, and there's good taxpayers' money, individual firms' money, this council's money, and it's just not going to happen. And I just think to myself, why don't we just give up now? Why don't we just give up now and say, well, the public don't want it, but I know quite a few people in Mablethorpe, and the ones I've spoken to rather like some of the investment opportunities that are going in. And some of them have said that they quite like the idea of a new rail station. Now, whether that's just for transporting nuclear waste, high or cuddly level, I don't know. I don't know. But the people I've spoken to, one or two people not in favour of it for the reason Councillor Baxter mentioned. But the way we're going, why don't we just say, enough's enough, let's just not bother wasting any time, effort, energy on it. But I would like to know, are we keeping a record of how much how much this is going to cost our county council? Please.
So we keep a record of the time and priority that various of us spend, and of course, if you remember when we created the post that Edward occupies, that and all of its ancillary costs is fully funded in a planning agreement, the same as we would have with any other major developer. So what we're trying to do is keep direct cost to a minimum, and we are also continuing to explore, as I said earlier, both those opportunities. So you spoke about rail as an example. That is one of the opportunities that we want to understand fully and understand whether it is a genuine community opportunity. So there's a lot of work going on, and as I say, the direct costs are funded through a planning agreement so that those are at no direct cost to the county council.
Thank you very much for that. Our debate has inevitably focused to a considerable degree on Thedlethorpe. We haven't really mentioned STEP. I just wanted to mention it and commend, and I hope that everybody in the committee would agree with this, commend the work that you are doing. There will be a new generation of nuclear power, hopefully in the more distant future. It's always seemed throughout my life to be in the more distant future, thermonuclear, safe thermonuclear, but it would be very, very good to make sure that we are, with our great engineering tradition here in Lincolnshire and some great engineering companies, very actively pursuing in the way that you've described all the possible leads of tapping in to the modular nuclear reactor programme, which is clearly going to happen, which both the major parties in Westminster support, and it's very important we're in that. So I just want to commend everybody on your team for doing that, and I hope you will continue to report, perhaps in future, as and when it is possible, in a little bit more detail on that very important work. Ashley, you wanted to come back very briefly, if you would.
Thank you. Yes, I've found the press release. Nuclear Waste Services responds to the decision of East Riding Council of Yorkshire to uphold a motion to withdraw from the citing process. So it seems that the council decided to withdraw from the process. So my question is this council able to withdraw from the process and thus kick the idea into touch?
Justin.
Yeah, the government's procedure on GDF citing provides for any relevant principal local authority to both form and disband partnerships under certain conditions. You took a decision as a council which was to engage with the process whilst remaining neutral, and that was the position that you took 18 months or so ago now.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, we have given that one a very thorough airing, and I appreciate that we've largely concentrated on Thedlethorpe, but again, when we agreed to participate in the community partnership, we did so on the basis that we would do so to provide as much support as we possibly could to the residents of those areas to make sure they got the information they require. And this scrutiny committee and the opinions and the questions that have been raised this morning are very much part of that, and we will continue to do that as we go forward. So just to conclude that section, I'm going to move that the committee is satisfied with the update, not necessarily with the notion of having the thing, but the update provided from the ongoing engagement with the Thedlethorpe Community Partnership, and I ask that relevant officers take comments and suggestions from today's debate under consideration when planning future engagement and participation in activities undertaken by the partnership. And I request that a further update tracking further progress be submitted in 6 months from now. Does anyone dissent from that? I have one dissenter, but... no, it's not something that requires seconding. I was simply asking, does anybody dissent? We have one dissenter, but the majority do not dissent. In that case, by majority, that matter is agreed. Thank you very much indeed for your participation on that one. We now move to the final item on the agenda, item 8, the committee work programme. This item is on pages 41 to 46 of the agenda pack, and the item enables the committee to comment on the content of its work programme, and the report will be presented by Chiara Hatzianu, our scrutiny officer. And the actions before us are to review the work programme and to highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. Over to you, Chiara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to confirm that since the publication of this agenda pack, we've had no further changes or updates to the work programme, as this has been published and can be found on pages 41 onwards of this agenda pack. Need I remind you that the work programme for this committee, as for every other committee, is a living document, a living organism, and it's developed further by your contributions as members of this committee. So if you wish to see any particular theme or topic included in future agendas, please do contact me at any point from this meeting forward to have a discussion about how ideas and topics could be incorporated in future agendas. Equally, officers and I do liaise to populate the agendas for future meetings, and as you can see, well, it's not that obvious, but the list of items to be programmed on page 44 has gone down a little bit, so I'm very pleased to see that, and I hope members are also pleased to see that. And this concludes my update to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara. Does any member have any comment or question? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Two comments. One is that I hope that we've got climate change impact as one of the agenda items looking for a home. I hope that would be sooner rather than later. And secondly, we talked earlier on about perhaps getting regular data about tourism. I wonder if it's also possible to get regular updates on our carbon carbon impact, so it would be a Chris Miller thing, I think. So how much carbon have we produced or got rid of this year compared to last year, or this 6 months compared to last 6 months, if it's something we measure. The other ones, we currently measure flooding. We have a whole committee for flooding. We currently measure waste. We have a waste partnership, if ever it met, to talk about waste. So that's what I'd like to suggest.
Chris, do you want to just comment on one part of that?
Yeah, regarding the carbon elements, that's reported annually, so I don't have a problem in bringing that back to committee on that basis.
We will note those comments. So are there any other members wishing to contribute to this item? No. In that case, thank you for those comments, Ashley. I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed, and that the additional items highlighted are noted. Any dissent from that? If so, indicate. I'm seeing none. In that case, that is agreed. And that brings us to the end of the meeting, slightly later than planned, despite the shorter agenda, but we've had some very good and very thorough and very informative debates. Thank you very much to everyone in the chamber and everybody who may be watching online or watching online later for joining us this morning. And that concludes the meeting at exactly midday. Thank you very much indeed.